thoroughly, and it will stay that way until I decide otherwise. Is that understood? Okay, let's get to work. Sophie and Melsom left the incident room soon after 10 to drive to Dorchester for the post-mortem. Melsom showed none of D.S. Marsh's deference, despite being younger and less experienced. Sophie wondered if he was just a little too brash. She had been impressed with Marsh's careful reasoning and had few concerns about leaving him in charge. Time would tell whether Melsom would warrant the same level of confidence. He offered to drive, but Sophie refused. "If we take one of the pool cars, then you can drive, but we're going in mine this morning, so I'll drive." "Okay," he said. "I'll take that to mean, yes, ma'am, shall I?" "Yes, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am." "Apology accepted. Remember who I am and who you are, Jimmy. That way we'll get on just fine." Sophie waited until they were out of town before speaking again. "Barry tells me you have the makings of a good detective, Jimmy. He thinks a lot of you." "I'm glad to hear it, ma'am. I'm willing to work hard and learn." "Good. I want you to act as an extra pair of eyes and ears today. When we're interviewing anyone, I talk first while you watch and listen. You take the notes. Don't interrupt unless you think I've missed something obvious. When I've finished my questions, I'll always ask if you have any. Don't ask anything just for the sake of it, only if it's something that you think is important. If you want to mention something to me on the quiet, just raise your finger slightly. At this stage, you're mainly here to observe, think, and learn. We can discuss and reflect later." "Understood, ma'am." Sophie's car was unpretentious, a reliable and well-proven saloon, but it did have real power under the bonnet. It handled well along the narrow lanes of the West Country. They arrived in plenty of time for the post-mortem. "I'm probably only going to be here for the initial external examination, Jimmy. It can get a bit too ghoulish for me once they start on the insides. Have you attended a PM before?" "No, ma'am," said Melsom. "In that case, it would be better if you came away at the same time as me. We'll get the rest of the information soon enough anyway." As it turned out, most of the useful information came in the first stages. Sophie knew the pathologist well. Benny Gould had worked with her on previous cases, and he was a family friend. The two officers had a quick coffee with him before moving on to the lab. The pathologist's assistant started by removing the clothing, which was then searched and bagged, ready for further examination. Nothing was found that would help identify the young woman. The victim had been wearing a dark jumper over a white blouse and a plain black knee-length skirt. Sophie wondered if these clothes were a uniform of some sort. She also had on black boots and pink stripy socks. Her underwear looked relatively new and clean. "Can I have a quick look at the boots, please? Leave them in the bag." The assistant passed them to Sophie, who turned them over to look at the heels. "Look, Jimmy, the heels have a fairly hard surface, which means they would have clicked as she walked. The attacker would have heard her coming." Benny Gould made comments as he worked, and his assistant took photos. "As I think you suspected, death was most probably due to the single knife wound to the chest. It's deep, but I can't be sure just yet whether it has damaged the heart. If it did, death would have been nearly instantaneous. I'll be looking at the internal organs later." "Can you make any guesses about the weapon used?" asked Sophie. "Probably a large bladed knife, maybe a kitchen knife." He finished his examination of her torso and transferred his attention to her head. "Now, here we have a contusion on the back of her head, probably due to it striking the ground. There has been some bleeding. But do you notice the slight marks on her face?" He stood aside to let Sophie see. "These are not fresh. There are signs of bruising on her right cheek and on the right side of her nose. She also has a slight bruise on her forehead. These are almost fully healed. I'd guess they're a couple of months old at least." "Any ideas as to the cause?" "Not at this stage." He indicated a point on her throat.